focus for now. Ladies and gentlemen, there's been a huge furore after one of the oldest universities of India, Osmania University, announced for a ban on protests by students who are angered by a blade found in their hostel food. Telangana today claims that the last week the agitating students also blocked the university's main road, holding the curry vessel and plate while chanting slogans against the administration. Amid tensions at the university, student protesters were seen being detained. Soon, the university issued a clarification saying the earlier circular has been misinterpreted and that it does not impose a blanket ban on student protests in open spaces, instead prohibits it outside administrative block. The students, though, claim the blade was not an isolated incident, and a few days ago, worms were also found in the cabbage curry served at the mess. Amid all of this, BRS has hit out at the Congress, saying they are turning Osmania into a prison, with Congress claiming this is a university decision, not theirs. Well, are institutions, governments repressing protests? Are student protests being clamped down upon? It's not just about Osmania or earlier instances of Delhi University, Jamia, JNU in India. Let's set our sight to the distant United States. 37-year-old Ranjini Srinivasan, a Harvard graduate, a PhD student in a last year and a final year for that matter, has been in the United States since 2016 and has had her visa revoked by the United States, with immigration officers visiting her. U.S. Homeland Security Secretary shared her image of leaving the country, claiming that she self-deported herself, accusing her of being a terrorist sympathizer. Her lawyer, speaking to Times of India, has called the allegations as false, claiming that Ranjini did not self-deport. This came soon after the March 8th arrest of Mahmoud Khalil, a Palestinian graduate student, a U.S. green card holder, active during the pro-Palestinian protests. There are other students as well. You'll see some of them up on your screens as well. Now, Democratic members of Congress have accused Trump of criminalizing dissent. Others have described the administration's actions as the greatest threat of free speech since the Red Scare. But is this about anti-Semitism or pro-Palestine or pro-Hamas protests? Or is this deeper, as some suggest, against Columbia University and the likes for diversity, equity and inclusion, or the DEI program, so deeply despised by the US administration? Are there any connecting dots? Or, world over, protests led by students that have been at the forefront of ensuring and promising change, how much of that now really gets targeted or repressed by the government? Is there any change? Let's get this to our panelists at this point. I'm being joined by Rajiv S. Khanna, Arlington-based immigration attorney, Rashmi Sawant, who's an ex-student leader and activist as well, Pastor Mark Burns, who's a spiritual advisor to President Trump and founder of the Now television network, Syed Fazal Kashani, who's a former student leader as well, and Professor Tanveer Ejaz, who's a columnist and academician. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Let me just get to both of you at this point first. Okay, let's just start at this point with Mark Burns. How do you look at what's unfolding in the United States? Let's just look at the allegations that are emerging. I mean, your political opponents really saying that what's happening in the United States is not just about, say, the pro-terrorist sympathizers, as the government claims. Your political detractors, your opposition is claiming that this is essentially because the government is so against DEI.
Well, you know, the thing of it is this. President Trump ran on an America First agenda, and that's very important to understand. Remember, Donald Trump was elected back in 2016, in which I was there back in 2015 with him, and then they stole the election in 2020, and threw the kitchen sink at him, everything they thrown at him, but yet he came back and launched the greatest political comeback in U.S. history, and the American people voted him in by high margins on the America First agenda. That means from now on, we will be
Sure.
placing American citizens' rights and desires over any immigrant. Anyone that is here in our nation, that is here illegally, we are now, for one of the first times, are going to utilize the law that has been established. Remember, former President Barack Obama deported way more people. Democrat Barack Obama deported way more people than President Trump done in both of his terms. Remember, he was known as the deporter-in-chief. And so this is not about Democrats or Republicans or DEI. This is about putting American citizens first, making America safer, getting those criminal aliens or criminal elements that have infiltrated our nation here illegally out of our nation, identify who they are, so that the American people can be safe. That's what this is all about. People want to try to deter and make it about DEI, make it about race, make it about everything that what is not. It's about keeping Americans safe, keeping our nation stronger from within, and protecting the rights of American citizens first. That's why President Trump ran on that, and he won by high margins, and the American people supported it.
Mark Burns, if that's the position that you're taking, that this is about keeping America first, here's a question that everybody is asking. These are students. These were students who were part of protests in campuses. Particularly the recent crackdown is for students who were part of pro-Palestinian protests in Colombia. So if these are the students who are part of that, many of these students are now accusing that they were not even heard, that their sides were not even out, or they were wrongfully detained, or there was no evidence against them. If these are the allegations coming in from students that have already been either detained, either arrested, or as the US has claimed, self-deported, which, you know, even in Ranjini's case, her counsel has completely rejected. But even if these are the cases, how is this America first?
Well, again, what's America first? Let me just say this about the Palestinian people. There are some peaceful Palestinian people. We need to end the war in the Gaza with Israel and Palestine quickly. There are some peaceful, loving people in Palestine that I'm praying for. As a matter of fact, I'm working right now with the world's greatest imams and the world's greatest rabbis, bringing them together in the African Union on May the 9th with my organization Impact to do just that, bring peace. And so I believe we need to most definitely find a peaceful solution for the peaceful people and identify that Hamas is the issue. Hamas is the enemy, and Hamas is the organization backed by Iran that is using some of the peaceful Palestinian people as human shields. Hamas need to be wiped off the face of the planet. And it's important that these students understand what exactly they're protesting. I'm a strong Israel supporter, but I also am a human rights supporter. And I don't desire for nobody to die, whether it be Palestinian or whether it be Jew or Israeli. I believe that there should be a peaceful solution. These students, some of them don't even know why they're marching. Some of them are marching for Hamas. Some of them are marching for the Iranian-backed terrorist group that desires to wipe them off the face of the planet. They are infidels in the eyes of Hamas. And so we got to be very clear what we're protesting. We're not those students, some of them are not protesting. They're not protesting. They're not protesting.
You are saying that you do not know what are they protesting about. But this, at the heart of
they
this,
are
Mark
protesting,
Burns,
and many of them are the freedom and the security of Hamas in America.
I get your point. You've made your point. Mark Burns, we're having a conversation. We're having a conversation. It's great to have conversations. These are two big democracies. We're part of two big democracies. It's great to have conversations. And I'm glad you're so vehement about it. Oh, so do we. We love the US as well. But here's the question. You know, if this is what you really are saying at the heart of it, if you're saying that they don't even know what they're protesting for, that's what every state claims. That's what every country claims. That's how clampdowns happen. So, Mark Burns, hold on. Let me just get in Tanveer Ijaz at this point. And again, as I said, we both represent great democracies. All of us on this panel represent great democracies. So, sure, we'll have fierce debates, but we will have the debates. So, Tanveer Ijaz, good evening. Now, we just heard Mark Burns. Mark Burns is saying a very simple thing. America has the right to put its interests first. And if there are those who are not about protesting for pro-Palestine, but are protesting for what US sees as terror organizations, they have a right to do what they are doing. How would you look at it as an educationalist?
I think one has to be clear about the fact that whether the students are supporting Hamas or they are supporting Palestinians, this line has to be very clear.
Yes.
As far as I'm concerned, these students, in the university, they protest about their positions that they take in various issues, not only just about Palestinians and Israel, but also about Ukraine and Russia, right? So these students in universities, and in this case, Srinivasan is a PhD scholar. She's well she understands about the whole issue, and therefore she's taken a position. And I think it's very wrong to criminalize these students, if they are protesting, and to say that they are criminals. I agree that every nation does have this whole concept of nation first, just like Trump has taken it as America first, right? But that American first does not mean that you muzzle democracy, you criminalize free speech, right? I mean, in the university, students, they take positions, and the job of the university is to engage with these students, right? To have a dialogue with these students, to have a conversation with these students, but not to crack down on them and put them in jail or something, because she was intimidated by the police officials. Now, there's no evidence which says that she was pro-Hamas. No show cause notice was given to her. No explanation was asked from her. It was straight away a case of intimidation by the state, because the state has its own views about Israel. And of course, US, perhaps one knows that it's fighting a proxy war against Palestine. So therefore, the students have all the right to take a position in the university to protest. We must remember that freedom struggle, in our own freedom struggle, it was the students who participated, and of course, they had gone unlawful also at times. We have history telling us about this. So the point is that who is on the ethical side is the question. But definitely, the students must not be criminalized because of their protest. They must not be, sort of labeled as terrorists. I mean, how bizarre it is to label student as terrorist. That is one of the worst things that could happen. The university must have a space for negotiation. University must have a space for dialogue. University must have a space for conversation. These things must be there. University is, a Columbia University, look at this.
Okay.
4,000 million US dollar was taken away. This whole grant was taken away because I don't know whether the Columbia University, they failed to protect some Jews or what. But then this clearly shows the university or the state's ideology in cracking down on certain sections and not on certain sections. So I think it's time that due process of law must take its course, and these students must be given space to rent out their feelings and to rent out their ideas. Yeah.
Okay. Mark Burns, let me just come to you. Answer Tanveer Ijaz, but before that, because Tanveer Ijaz also spoke about India's freedom struggle. My team just collated some of the biggest protests that have happened over the last few months, few years across the world, whether it be the huge Bangladesh revolution spearheaded by students, anti-CAA protests in India, students, the JNU protest 2016, of course. You have South Africa, fees must fall, which actually saw freezing on fees, college university fees, education reforms. You had the landmark Delhi gang rape protests, again spearheaded by students. Tiananmen Square protests, who will forget that for that matter? Even the Soweto uprisings of South Africa. These are, history. The world history is known for protests which have been steered by students. Now, here's the question that Tanveer Ijaz is raising, and many people across the world are raising, Mark Burns. Where is the space for discourse? And if you are saying that there is a student who is quote-unquote a terrorist or quote-unquote pro-terrorist, where is the counter to that? Where is the space for counter to that? Where is the space for dialogue for that? Is America losing out on that space? And this is also concerns, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark Burns, this is also concerns that are emerging from within educational institutions in the United States.
Well,
Is
first
that
of all,
a challenge? Is that a perception challenge before Trump administration?
Well, I think that it's important to understand that America, and I don't think India does too, the great Prime Minister Modi, and again, I'm leaving for India tomorrow, so I cannot wait to spend 10 days in your beautiful, beautiful country in Hyderabad and Bangladesh and New Delhi, and so I'll be there in person. So hopefully I get to meet you in person. But I can tell you, America does not negotiate with terrorists. Again, I think Secretary Marco Rubio made it very clear in his interview recently on Face the Nation when he stated, if you're going to fill out a visa and in the visa you declare the reason that you're coming is to support pro-terrorist or pro-Hamas activities, then you would be declined to enter into America because we have deemed Hamas as a terrorist organization. And I think most people have deemed Hamas as a terrorist organization.
So there's no way that I'm questioning your stand, but did these students enter this in the visa?
Let me ask you a question. Now, the proper discourse is how I and other leaders are doing it. Again, I am very pro-Israel. I condemn October the 7th, like most people do. But I think there needs to be a clear distinction between some of the peaceful people of Palestine who are Muslims and not vilify or demonize Muslims or Islam as a whole or Palestinians as a whole. And that's what is happening. That's kind of like what happened with the Black Panther Party. I'm very familiar with student-led organizations. I am talking to you right now on national, international television as a Black man in America because of the freedom fighters that led the way, student protests that helped launch the civil rights movement here in America. So I'm very clear. But again, these students were protesting the freedom of American citizens, not protesting the rights and freedoms of a terrorist organization that kidnap Jews and done terrorist activities. That's the problem, and that's why his visa is going to be revoked, according to Marco Rubio and others who are protesting in these pro-Hamas. Yes, there's discourse, and yes, there's a place for conversation, but not about terrorist organizations. There is no freedoms for terrorists in America. And President Trump ran on it. He stood by it. Americans overwhelmingly voted for him, and so therefore we will not allow terrorist organizations to operate or even have a voice on American soil. And if you are a green card individual or a permanent resident that can have your green card revoked or your status changed when you are supporting terrorist organizations, then I believe wholeheartedly you should not be in this country. And so let's not make this about the innocent, beautiful people of Palestine that I hope to be visiting them very soon too. No, this is about Hamas.
This isn't about innocent, beautiful people about Palestine, Mark Burns. This is about students who are studying in the United States who have followed a process to be there, and suddenly your political opponents are saying that you're criminalizing the system. Where is the other side? Where are they? Where is the voice? Where is their defense? If there is a state that is accusing them of what they have done in the way that they have, where is that voice? But while we've heard you both,
but remember, many of these were not peaceful protests too. Let's be clear. Remember that they got to be
Mark Burns,
peaceful
I'll come
protests.
to you. I'll give you the last word to finish this. Okay, Rajiv Khanna, if I can get you in. Rajiv Khanna, for what's unfolding, and it's not necessarily only the United States, largely it's United States, and we'll get to the other parts in a bit. But with what's unfolding, how must students who have been part of protests, who are likely to be part of protests, pro-Palestine protests are right now at the heart of it, are at the focus of it. There could be other protests, other political protests, non-political protests. How should students be really looking at it with the changing dynamisms in United States?
Thank you very much. In every democracy, there is a dynamic tension between rights and responsibilities. Equally true, there is a dynamic tension within the three branches of governance. There is the legislature to make the laws, the presidency to execute the laws, and the courts, the judiciary, to interpret the laws. If an administration steps in and says, I am the judge, jury, legislature, and executioner, there's little we can do. Or is there? The answer is there is a lot we can do. Trump administration has been losing cases all through the land. They've gone all the way to the Supreme Court with many things, including the birthright citizenship. Students, if they want to protest, should protest peacefully. I agree with everyone. I don't think any reasonable person can say it's okay to light fires and destroy property or attack people. However, if you protest, know that you are protesting in a regime that has usurped the power of all three wings of governance. There is no doubt about that. Who are you to say which protest is acceptable and which is not, as long as it is peaceful? The problem is
I can answer
we
that
are
question.
dealing
The argument,
in reality.
let me play the devil's argument so that we can get the perspective. Here you had Mark Burns and you've also had the administration claim that these are not peaceful protests.
They're
So
not.
for an argument that the state makes in the sense it does, and we all know protests from students, we all have seen protests for that matter, student protests. The state would say it's motivated. In this case, the United States is saying it's motivated. It was not peaceful. So what are you talking about rights? Then how do students approach that?
No law in the world can punish a state of mind unless it is expressed in action. Unless I destroy property, unless I hurt someone, how can you say my protest is not motivated properly? That is utter nonsense. What is important is to see the expression of it. And if a student gets caught in a situation where that expression is under question, they should be taken to courts. They should go through the due process of law. Unless there is such an immediate urgency that somebody is going to get hurt, the student is planning a bombing or something, there's no reason to skip the due process of law. That is unacceptable in any democracy. Thank you.
Mark Burns, you want to respond to that last line, a very important line from an immigration attorney. He's saying, unless there is absolute emergency, the due process of law must not be skipped. Courts are there. If the state thinks they are immediate threat, take them to court. Mark Burns.
Well, if the question is for me, I'm not sure if it was or not. The reality of it is this. Hamas is a armed terrorist organization. When you have students who are not peacefully, and peacefully is just that. You got to be peaceful. You have to take care of a Mahatma Gandhi or a Dr. Martin Luther King nonviolent approach. But when you have students who are violently screaming and breaking things and destroying property and making Jewish students and any other student that attends a university unsafe, when you are having them to be threatened, when you're having signs that says, we are Hamas. Matter of fact, recently ICE, the organization, recently deported an Indian student, revoked her student visa because she was supporting, holding a sign saying, we are Hamas. And she spelled Hamas wrong, but yet she is now back in India. And so this is what this protest looks like to the American people. You can have peaceful discord, peaceful conversations without having argumentation or fighting. And yes, I am speaking with the Palestinian community. I am meeting with those who would be so-called be on the other side in a peaceful discord without screaming and yelling or stripping the rights of individuals. I believe America is in a right to remove people who are supporting terrorist organizations like Hamas.
Okay. Rashmi Samant, as well as Syed Fazal Kashani, if I can get you both in at this point. Rashmi Samant, we saw something happen in Osmania University, and why do we bring, many may say it's an extreme parallel you're drawing. What's happening in the United States, what's happening in India, you can't really draw a parallel to it. We'll get Tanveer Ejaz to speak about it. You both are also there in this panel. But I want to ask you this. One of the oldest universities, there was this whole furor about how they stopped protests, and then they issued a clarification. They've been taken out of context. They have not stopped protests out in open spaces. It has not been stopped. Now, as somebody who has been a student leader yourself, I'm sure you've been part of protests as well. Are there concerns? Are there patterns as you look at student protests world over?
Sneha, I think drawing parallels between what's happening at Osmania University and at Columbia is, we can't do that because what's happening at Osmania University is something that's very local to the university. It's a problem that students are facing on campus. And I think you have every right to protest that. I mean, who else is going to raise that issue? But increasingly, campuses abroad, all over the world, in fact, have not just started to raise issues which are impertinent to their own country, but also which are happening miles away, from that particular country. For instance, Palestine and Israel, the whole issue, is so far removed from the campus of Columbia University, is so far removed from the country that United States of America is. So I think we need to see, and everything in moderation is all right, Sneha. The minute you break the barriers of moderation, that's when everything becomes problematic. Everything in moderation is all right. I think calling off protests and banning protests, that's not the way to go. But weaponizing student protests and trying to create a hostile environment for other students or try to enforce regime change, I think that's a little extreme. I went to the University of Oxford. It's turned out many fine statesmen. It's turned out the highest number of political leaders to hold the highest office in the world. But it's also turned out people like Osama bin Laden, who was a terrorist who brought down the World Trade Center, because of whom many are dead, and there's so much disparity, and there's a black dot in the world's history. So there are both sides to consider. So for everything that's right, for everything that's great, and for every positive change, there are also elements trying to bring in negative change. So I think that needs to be put into consideration, and you need to look at it from that holistic perspective. And students are not children, Sneha.
Rashmi
The
Samant,
person in question.
Rashmi Samant, two things. One thing, did I hear it correct? Did you say banning protests is okay? Did you say
No,
that,
I did not.
did I not hear that correct?
I said banning protests
maybe
is
I heard.
not right. That was
Okay.
the first thing that I said. That it's not all right to ban protests. But I said that everything needs to be in moderation. You cannot weaponize a protest to, create a hostile environment for other students. You cannot weaponize protests to support terrorism. Just because you're a student, that doesn't mean that you can support terrorism or support a terrorist organization. There are lines, there are boundaries, but protests shouldn't be banned. Everything in moderation is great, and I think a university needs to be a healthy learning environment.
But what is healthy, what is not healthy is also possibly very relative. Syed Fazal Kashani, would you agree with what Rashmi Samant is saying? Rashmi, no, hold it. Let me just get it. Syed Fazal Kashani, so Rashmi Samant is saying, just a minute. No, I'm not talking about terrorism. I did not say there's nothing called healthy terrorism. There can never be any healthy terrorism. It's not about healthy terrorism. You say healthy environment, healthy campus environment. That's what we're talking about. Terrorism can never be healthy. Any form of terror can never be healthy. So we're not even getting that way. I don't have even a slight iota of doubt that no form of terror is okay at all. But at this point, Syed Fazal Kashani, let me just get you in to what Rashmi Samant said, and it's an important point. How do you look at it? Don't weaponize protest. How do you see that across campuses?
Well, the protests happening in Columbia University, the government and the panelists, Rashmi, they are mixing things up actually. The protests that are held in Columbia University, they are pro-Palestine. They are raising issues of humanitarian cause that is happening in Palestine, the ethnic cleansing that has happened in Palestine. The world is seeing what is happening in Palestine, and so if the student community is raising issue on that, There's no wrong about it. Now the administration, the government over there, they can claim that okay, these are pro-Hamas. But I saw the visuals, I saw the protests. I didn't see any Hamas flag over there. I didn't see any pro-Hamas slogans being raised over there. And if this is the case, that the administration is completely, banning these protests, then deporting the students, then they should stop claiming to be the flag bearers of the democracy. I mean, does it also mean that the rule of law is not applicable in United States, which claims to be one of the flag bearers of democracy? The students, if they are expressing their opinions, I mean, this should be a battle of ideas. If the administration thinks that the stand that students have taken is wrong, they should sit across the table and try to, convince them what is right according to them. But banning the student organizations, student protest, and then deporting, I mean, this is not justified at all. And this is from the university which is renowned across the globe. The university has produced the top scholars of the world, and the students, they are not illiterates. They know what is happening around. They are well aware of it. So if they are raising their issues, if they are raising these voices, and it is not only the immigrants. Let me just clear it with the to the administration, the Mr. Mark over there. There are students, there are citizens of United States who are in the protest. Will they deport them as well? Will they ban them? I mean, the more they oppress these voices, it will spread like the wildfire. So the government and the administration needs to
Rashmi
understand that
Rashmi Samant, somebody who has a very I mean, you have here, I mean, we will never get to know the nitty-gritties of what unfolded and how unfolded and what really was the role unless the government really comes out and we hear the other version. But here's the thing, Rashmi Samant, look at what Syed Fazal Khashani is saying. He's like, these are students who are doing their PhD, who are in their higher education grades for that matter. They know what they're doing and they are pro-Palestine. They are not saying they are supporting Hamas. That's what he's claiming. Now, all of this becomes also a perception battle, which unfortunately is not being spoken of within a university.
If I may add in, Sneha, the whole idea is that if you're educated from a world-class university like Columbia, and if you're doing a higher degree like, a PhD, then perhaps you're aware and, you're educated and you're taking the correct stance. Osama bin Laden is an Oxford graduate. He has a higher degree from there, and he also holds a PhD. He has an engineering degree as well. That didn't make him right. So just because you have a degree or you attend an Ivy League university, that doesn't make you correct. That doesn't make you the flag bearer of what is right in the world. It goes without saying that these,
that does not justify.
If I may, please.
Okay, Syed Fazal. Okay, just a minute. Syed Fazal, I'll come to you. Let Rashmi Samant finish her point.
I was in Israel recently, and I went to the settlements. I went to communities which were ravaged by the October 7 attack that happened in Israel. And if you look at the brutality with which Jewish people were killed, then that is a humanitarian crisis as well. And if I see, posters saying we are Hamas and so on and so forth, and actually supporting it, then it's incredibly dangerous. It's a dangerous trend in an educational university. It is dangerous and it's hostile for Jewish students who study there. So, you need to consider all of this. And there's a history at Columbia of, Jewish students who are being heckled for actually, putting, posters remembering the victims of October 7 attacks. They were heckled by the same, so-called humanitarian supporting pro-Palestine.
Okay, I'm out of time. Rashmi Samant, so to what you're saying, very quickly, let me get in Syed Fazal Kashani. Syed Fazal Kashani, Rashmi Samant saying essentially that protests also need to know what they're protesting about. Before I go to Professor Tanveer Ijaz, very quickly, your time to respond, Fazal, 20 seconds.
Well, that's what I'm trying to, tell my panelists over here, that the students who are protesting are pro-Palestinians. They are not supporting the terrorist organization. And if there is anybody who is supporting or who's holding the flag, they should be dealt with the law. I mean, there is a rule of law in the country. You cannot act as a dictator and just
Okay, there seems to be some network issue. Professor Tanveer Ejaz, very quickly,
I wanted to say
I'll give
this.
you maybe 30, 40 seconds. Okay, Mark Burns, I'll come to you. I'll
Yes.
come back to you because,
Right.
I mean, everybody has made a point about you and obviously you have a right to respond. But let me just very quickly go to Tanveer Ejaz. Professor Tanveer Ejaz, are there concerns, are there parallels to how student protests are being seen by governments, by institutions, or is that way too much of a stretch?
No. I mean, government across, they see protest as an attack on them personally, right? So there is sort of a retribution coming from the state or from the government, right? It's a clash of, somebody said clash of ideology or clash of ideas. But my point is that, you take any protest anywhere in the world, students protest, it's a collective protest, right? It's a collective protest. You see hordes of students protesting against a certain issue which they strongly feel about it. But the point is that a state comes, or the government picks up the leader or anyone, who they think that they are vulnerable. Right now, an Indian citizen, Srinivasan, she seemed to be quite vulnerable at this point of time, and she was picked up by the departments, and there's no principle of natural justice which was laid down. There's no evidence about her supporting Hamas. There's no show cause notice. There's no explanation. So therefore, this collective protest, whenever it happens in any university, what I understand is that university must engage with these students because they have a point. You just don't leave them like that, right? They are protesting, they have a point, engage as soon as possible with them, and then have a conversation and then come out with some kind of a solution. But you can't crack down on them, put them behind bars, criminalize them, label them. This is something which is uncalled for, and it would rather escalate the protest rather than listening to them. It's going to escalate. So that's the point. What I think it's important to any protest, particularly in India or abroad, anywhere.
Okay.
The problem is, this is the problem with that.
Okay, Mark
and if I may
Burns.
say real quickly, the problem with that is this. The organizers of these pro-Palestinian protests should quickly isolate those who are having the signs that says we are Hamas, or we are for Hamas, or we are pro-Hamas. It is very hostile to try to have regular conversations with many of these protesters. The problem is these leaders are not segregating those who are pro-Hamas. They're intertwined. And if they are so true to their word, if the pro-Palestinian protests are not pro-Hamas, then they should isolate them. It's very similar to the Black Lives Matter protests that took place here in America. And once the Black Lives Matters elements of the Black Lives Matter start condemning and asking for the death of cops in America, the police in America, what Black Lives Matter should have done is say those people are not with us, isolate them. That is not what Black Lives Matter stand for. We're standing for those who are calling for the death of American cops, they're not with us. That's what the pro-Palestinian protesters need to do, but they are not. They're intertwined. And so for those of us who are outside looking in, we have no idea who is who. I'm pro-Israel, I'm pro-Palestine, I'm pro-America, and I can have all three of them without supporting Hamas. My position is very clear. We need to wipe Hamas off the face of the planet. That's exactly what these pro-Palestinian protesters need to be declaring when they protest. And they are extremely violent. Have you not looked at the videos? They have made life very difficult for Jewish students. Hold on, let me finish. They've made life very difficult for Jewish students on these campuses. And these universities like Columbia are not defending or protecting the safety of these Jewish students. That's the problem. And so for anyone to get on and say we shouldn't lock these students up, they got to obey
Mark
the law
Burns,
first.
We're totally out of time. Your point has been made. You've made a full point. I've allowed you the entire point to be made. Rajiv Khanna, less than 20 seconds. Your last word to the show, to students and families who are watching.
United States is still a great place to live. Just because we have these random injustices does not mean the system doesn't work. Even with this administration, despite this administration, the system seems to be working okay because the courts are working. So if you get stuck in any situation in which you feel uncomfortable, please contact a lawyer. There are plenty of us willing to volunteer our time to help you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, as we always promise, views from all sides, views from every perspective that matters. You've heard it all. We leave you to decide what you want to. Rashmi Sawant as well as Syed Fazal Kashani, thank you very much for your time and your perspectives, important ones. Rajiv S. Khanna, thank you very much for your time. Professor Tanveer Ajaz, thank you very much for your time and your perspective. And of course, Mark Burns, thank you for that very vehement pitch, and see you in India. Thank you very much. Time for a very short break.